Namaste and greetings. I, Bhanvi, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. Today marks the inaugural day of Ending Gender-Based Violence, Cohort 2, Awareness of Policies and Governance, an online national spring school program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course. This training program is organized by #IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center, GISC. To kickstart the things, let's begin with a concise overview of the program. Ending gender-based violence in India is a complex and a multifaceted challenge that requires a comprehensive approach involving legal, social, cultural, and educational dimensions. While there have been significant efforts to address this issue, numerous challenges persist in the world. It is important to shed light on the urgency of addressing this critical societal challenge by policy awareness. So, in a nation where the Constitution promises equality, justice, and a life with dignity, the prevalence of crimes against women remains a glaring concern. Despite the existence of various legal provisions, including the Dowry Prohibition Act 1961, the Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act 2005, and the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013. Despite all this, the rising incidence of violence demand a deeper understanding of a legal system's intricacies. So, in light of this, the IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center is proud to introduce this online training course that aims to unravel the complexities surrounding persistent violence against women, exploring not only the legal remedies available, but also their implementation aspects. It prompts critical thinking about the necessity for separate laws, the role of international legal provisions, the effectiveness of deterrence in eradicating violence, and the existing gaps between the legal frameworks and the ground realities. So, by delving into these questions, the course seeks to stimulate dialogue on broader measures beyond the law to ensure the safety and well being of women, challenging society to collectively address and rectify the root causes of gender-based violence. So, we have an eminent panel for this program, and the chair of this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, New Delhi. And this program has an excellent panel of experts who are going to share their expertise for the duration of this program. So I would like to introduce the distinguished expert panels that includes Advocate Dr. Flavia Agnes ji, women rights lawyer, co-founder, Majlis Legal Center, Mumbai, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida ji, lawyer and human rights activist, Goa, and a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI, Dr. Wahida Nainar ji, independent researcher, gender and human rights consultant, as well as a senior fellow at IMPRI, Professor B.J. Lakshmi Nanda ji, principal and professor of political science, Miranda House, University of Delhi, Professor Veena Vaswani ji, professor, Department of Forensic Medicine, Director, Center for Ethics, Program Director, YU, FIC Masters in Research, Ethics for India, Yinepoya deemed to be university, and a visiting professor at IMPRI, Ms. Anju Dubey Pandey, formerly specialist, ending violence against women, and a team lead, gender responsive governance, UN Women India, Dr. Padma ji, director, sexual and reproductive health, CREA, former coordinator, and a visiting senior fellow IMPRI, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, visiting senior fellow IMPRI, advocate, author, researcher, and a gender and human rights activist. Maya Avasthi ji, co-founder of Transgender Welfare Equity and Empowerment Trust Foundation. Advocate Celine Thomas ji, advocate at Celine Thomas and Associates, Bangalore, and a visiting senior fellow IMPRI. Professor Soumya ji, professor Jindal Global School and director, Center for Women's Rights. Dr. Kirti Bolineni ji, President, Vasavya Mahila Mandal ji, Advocate Audrey Melo ji, Director, Majlis Legal Center, Mumbai, visiting senior fellow IMPRI, Nandini Sarkarji, Director of Business Operations, Management Services Private Limited, and Mr. Harish Sadnani ji, Co-founder and Executive Director of Men Against Violence and Abuse. And the panel of conveners comprises of Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, Professor Gaumadi Shri Devi ji, Visiting Professor IMPRI, Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director at IMPRI. So, continuing with a commitment to fostering awareness and actionable insights, I extend a warm welcome to all the participants engaging in this crucial discourse on ending gender based violence. I express my gratitude for your keen interest and dedication in investing time, energy, and effort toward comprehending the intricate landscape of policies and governance surrounding this pervasive issue. Your participation plays a pivotal role in uniting practitioners and enthusiasts alike, creating a collaborative space for impactful policy research and advocacy. Thank you for your invaluable contributions to this transformative course. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. So before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. First, please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions in the Q&A box and not as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. So now, without any further ado, let us start the program. So it is my honor and privilege to invite the chair for the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to start the program with her opening chair remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Banvi, for introducing the course and setting the tone and the spirit of the course, which is very important. And it is also at a very historic juncture of 75 years of international women's movement and the fight against violence against women. I would first of all like to thank Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Ms. Ashtaba, Ms. Ritvika, Ms. Vaishali Singh, Ms. Priyanka Negi, Sri Satyam Tripathi, and Ms. Vidita. Welcome, and Dr. Shalu Nigam, of course, very important person so far as this course is concerned. And also welcome Flavia, Agnes madam, who will be joining us soon. Now, women's movement in India launched campaigns against various forms of violence, first against women, and then the gender awareness also came. They fought against sexual violence, domestic violence, sexism in advertisements, as well as against state repression during caste and communal riots in the early 80s. So before that, during the post-emergency period from say 1977 to 1980, small groups of women's rights activists in Hyderabad, Bombay, Delhi, Madras had started taking up individual cases of custodial rape, deaths of housewives under mysterious circumstances, excesses by the state enforcement machinery during the social conflicts, which had increased in number as well as intensity of the violence. The mass of poor women involved in struggles for tribal people or industrial working class or the Dalit movement faced misogyny from the members of their own organization, social ostracism, and also violence perpetrated by police, military, and paramilitary forces. With these kinds of experiences of individual violence, institutional violence, systemic violence, newly emerging women's movement felt the necessity to put violence against women on its central political agenda. While building up systematic campaigns in different socio-cultural and geographical contexts of India, and among women of different economic and socio-cultural backgrounds and political persuasions, they had to evolve a day-to-day tactics to be effective and long-term strategies to carve out more space for women to gain gender justice within the criminal justice system, within the judiciary, in society at large. Their efforts resulted in series of legal reforms and gender-responsive policies and programs and budgetary allocations. So this is the very important to understand when we are developing conceptual understanding of how the gender-based violence became a very important issue. To build up an effective campaign, it is very important to concentrate on making ourselves aware of various nuances of gender-based violence and how to combat it. First, women's groups have so far given major importance to preventive measures, evolving support structures to help survivors of violence, filing legal cases, helping women to rebuild their lives, the all resource persons who are directly involved in this kind of work, and they'll be sharing their experiences as well as the learnings in the coming days of this course. But women activists are increasingly realizing that it is not enough, and we must strike at the root cause of violence. We need to be the change the value systems of of the people, existing structures that and engender the understanding to combat violence against women. And women's groups have shunned discussion on the subject with the man in the initial phase, but now the dialogues, like we also are going to have Harish Sadani, who is a founder of Man Against Violence Against Women, MAVA. It is increasingly felt that men should be involved in the process of combating violence against women and other gender minorities. Women's sexuality is socially constructed. Transgender movement may question this. Given the patriarchal control over the existence of women, it becomes imperative that men are drawn into process of rethinking power equation that exist in the society and the patriarchy, the way it controls lives of the people who are perceived as weak and vulnerable. So it is very important to deconstruct patriarchy and the deep-rooted notions of a good woman versus bad woman, or she deserves it, or the ideology of victim blaming, or finding fault with the victim, and that today's women expect too much, or transgender people deserve to be violated. No, that kind of ideology we need to challenge. We need to have more and more dialogue in the community, in the educational institutions, and in the wherever we are working at the workplace, because sexual harassment at workplace is declared as one of the most devastating occupational hazard of the 21st century, as women are increasingly entering the traditional male bastion. So the anxiety among men is also increasing. Gender-based violence is a violation of the bodily integrity and dignity. And we also need to fight the ideology and the language of sexism, of misogyny. We have to have a dialogue with media. So efforts invested in this course are aimed at making of a collective conscience so that gender-based violence in any form is not tolerated. And this is how we are going to discuss the whole issue in today's two sessions. First one is on the overview of the situation, and then Flavia will also be addressing role of policy in addressing gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for gracefully introducing the program to all of us. So moving forward towards our first session of the day, that is on foundations of gender-based violence, its historical context and the definitions. I once again would like to invite you to take the floor. If you could kindly take it from here, ma'am.
Yeah. Is my slide visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So when we talk about the historical context and issues and action strategies of violence against women, I think it's very important to understand the role of the women's rights movement globally as well as in our country has played. Okay, for the first time, like women social reformers, they also through their writings and through their action, if you read, say, Kavya Phule by Savitribai Phule or Behna Bai's Abhanga, where she talks about the daily grind and the violence that a woman, in fact, most of the women religious social reformers, right, from 12th century Janabai to 19th century social reformers had faced tremendous violence, domestic violence. Many of them they were abandoned, they had to leave their home. So the violence against women has been a concern of any sensitive, creative person, but it was there in the name, in the form of individual struggles, but the collective action against violence against women, it started happening to some extent, we can say, during freedom movement. It was person like Pushpa Mehta. She forced the Viceroy of India to come up with the suicide report. And she really struggled hard. She traveled all in different villages, and she collected documents of why women were killing themselves by throwing themselves into the pond or a well, or burning themselves, or burnt, we don't know, because there were no suicide notes at that time. And they were hanging. They were found hanging. And she forced the British government to come up with the suicide report. Finally, it came out in 1930, as a result of which certain shelter homes were created. She was the first person who started whole movement for Vikas Gru. Vikas Gru is that when you are thrown out, or you face domestic violence and you are deserted, and your natal family also doesn't support you, you come to this Vikas Gru, where you don't have to lead a vegetative life. You get vocational education, you study, you become self-dependent and rebuild your life. It's such a revolutionary idea that we had. We also had the same women like Pushpa Ben Mehta, and Mridula Sarabhai, and also Hansa Ben Mehta. All of them were also involved in managing the refugee camps during partition. And when thousands of women were abandoned by their families, neither their in-laws nor their parents wanted to accept them. These three women, they prevailed upon the Prime Minister, Mr. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, to start Central Social Welfare Board and allocate budget so that these women could rebuild their life. So I think this kind of efforts were made even during that time. But what we see that women themselves, women survivors of violence, or women who have experienced varied forms of violence, they also started talking about it. That we are not fighting someone else's battle. It is our own battle. We have seen overt and covert form of violence in our life. And this self-mobilization of women started happening in the 70s. First organization was Progressive Organization of Women in Hyderabad. They launched a campaign against dowry, and during the emergency, many of them were even arrested under MISA. And in the post-emergency period, we saw that massive organizations against rape, sexual violence, and the atrocities perpetrated by police, military, and paramilitary forces became a central issue of the women's movement. In 1975, when the UN declared International Women's Year, official organizations were talking about equality, development, and peace. But the grassroots women's organization were bringing out the concerns for violence against women. So it is a women's movement which had brought this issue on a social, on a political agenda. Otherwise, because they were talking about world peace. The rebuttal by the women's movement was that peace begins from home. So you have to take up the question, domestic violence is not a personal problem. Rape is not a personal problem. You can't use the ideology of women victim blaming that she asked for it. She wore provocative dress. Who asked you to go out unescorted at night? This kind of ideology can attitude of the criminal justice system, of the media, and of the community will not be allowed. We have to understand violence against women as a manifestation of patriarchal control over women's sexuality, fertility, labor, and bodily integrity and dignity. In Copenhagen conference, in 90 Meet Ticket conference, also violence against women was a very important issue, especially from the countries, Latin America, Asia, and African countries, all the neo-colonial countries, where they had seen that right from politics to social, social milieu, and in the name of culture and tradition also, various forms of violence were taking place, and because of the fractured modernity. At one level, you talk about modernization, but when women ask for their rights, you use violence. India signed, and we know that in 78, UN also came up with the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, in which violence against women was a very important agenda. India signed the CEDAW document. Many countries, I think over 160 countries signed the CEDAW document and took it as a important political action of the state, and come up with the legal system or progressive legislations to combat violence against women. In the Nairobi forward-looking strategy end of the decade in 1985, if you see and you can download this Nairobi forward-looking strategy, there also, along with the developmental issue, the violence against women was a very important concern. And the newer forms of violence that had, like, for example, acid attacks, which came during the Bangladesh war. The army had, Pakistani army had extremely sophisticated weapons, and the people in Bangladesh, they did not have anything to defend themselves. They started using acid, which is used for household cleaning. Okay, put them in a plastic bag and throw it at the quote-unquote enemies. The same thing after the new nation was formed, the same acid was being thrown against any woman who was found to be fashionable or did not conform to their understanding of ideal woman. No? So this kind of a new thing. Another issue of that African women's organizations, African Women's Association for Research and Development, they also brought in the issue of FGM, female genital mutilation, which was earlier seen as a custom. It is an African custom. 56 countries in Africa, they cut the clitoris of a woman. Okay, it was never even seen as gender-based violence. It was the women's movement in African countries which said that no, it is an extremely barbaric custom. In fact, a person like Nawal Saadawi, who was a doctor and was dealing with such patients, who many of them died due to septicemia, she wrote a book about it, for which she was even imprisoned. So we saw that so many issues which were just hidden from the human history. Like we know that during 13th to 19th century, a lot of women were killed as witches who did not conform to the patriarchal model of a woman who would just be the breeder and homemaker. They all were killed as witches. So even the new studies, historical studies on violence became very important. In fact, currently also one very important article is, I think, is being circulated in WhatsApp group. In India came up with a very comprehensive report on women and perspective for women, 1988 to 2000. Even Shram Shakti report mentions the occupational safety and hazard. Sexual harassment is an occupational hazard. 1993, India ratified CEDAW, and in that, as a result of which, what we got was so many other comprehensive laws, especially the formation of National Commission for Women, which was a recommendation way back in 1974 towards Equality Report. Platform for Action in Beijing Conference also, combating violence against women was a very important concern, because by then decision was taken in the Vienna Conference of the UNHRC of women's rights are human rights, and combating violence against women needs to be done on a consistent basis from 25th of November to 10th of December, because it is so pervasive and it has existed for centuries. So we need nearly 15 days of campaign every year to combat violence against women. And in Millennium Development Goal, initially it did not include violence against women as a development goal, but it was the women's movement which critiqued goal number 5, which talked about gender equality, and the indicators of gender equality were only education, health, employment, and political participation and decision making, while there was no inclusion of safety of women. When such a high number of women are dying due to gender-based violence, so revision was made, and the limitation which initially MDG had were corrected. And in 2025 Sustainable Development Goal, also the freedom from violence is a very, very important concern. So when you talk about gender justice or social justice or environmental justice or distributive justice, everywhere violence, gender-based violence becomes a very important concern, because you are trying to change the power equation. Those who have enjoyed power and privilege, for them it is very difficult to share power or to see to it that this inequality is being challenged. No? So women's rights are human rights. That was the slogan which emerged from Vienna Conference. And that, how do we see conceptually the question of whole unequal power relation that results in gender-based violence? So you have prevailing realities, that of inequality. You have certain instruments such as Constitution of India or UDHR, which talk about equality. Constitution of India, Article 14, 15, 16, they talk about equality, equal opportunity, freedom, dignity, liberty. But your social location is such, because of the intersectional vulnerability, that some people are able to enjoy the fruits of constitutional guarantee, others are not. Then what do you need? You need equity. How would you get the equity? It can come because of the bottom-up approach of the women's movement and social movement. It can come laterally because women start demanding the equality, and it can also come because of some of the new legislations, for example, sexual prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, where the state takes responsibility. Most of the laws regarding gender-based violence, where it is a violation against the state. So that is and you provide certain measures, you provide by budgetary allocation, you provide one-stop crisis center, you provide shelter, and also hand-holding of survivor of violence to rebuild their life. These are the measures of equity. And even with that, you also you see that the social situation and the cultural values are such that even with equity, you face a lot of injustices. So finally, you also need to punish those who are perpetrating violence. So this whole journey, it's very important to understand, to come up with any strategies, long-term strategies, as well as immediate tactics. Domestic violence, a definition of it has been it's defined in the DV Act, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, which means actual abuse or threat of abuse, whether physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, or economic. We had section 149 of 498A, about which I think Advocate Shalu Nigam will be telling us a lot. And this law takes care of both the civil and the criminal dimension, which protection of women from this is called Powder Act 2005, which recognizes the right to residence, provision for appointment of protection officers, and recognition of service providers. Who are the service providers? Hospitals, police station, shelter home, counselors, protection officers. They are the service providers. So we need budget for their salary. We need a place where the survivors can go. Training for protection officers and judges, awareness creation, and budget allocation at all 3 levels, national, subnational, and the Panchayati Raj institution level. Sexual violence, there are 3 very important laws about which I think Shalu Nigam will be talking in her special sessions that we have for different laws. One is the POCSO Act 2012. Second one, the amendments in the antiquated rape law that we got after the Nirbhaya tragedy, and the massive protests that our country had. Parliament of India unanimously passed the amendments in the Evidence Act, but still we saw that on two counts we have lost out the battle. For example, marital rape, and the APSA Act, like when the husband or army man are accused of rape, they are above the law. And the argument which was used by our parliamentarian was that if we make husband a culprit of rape, then the institution of family will get destabilized. And if the army men are accused of rape, and if we try them, and then morale of Indian army will be shattered and it will be affected. And that these are the two arguments which were used in the parliament, but still the battle is going on. Women are using the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act, in which is defines violence as a economic violence, physical violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, and sexual violence. Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act at Workplace 2013 came after Babri Devi's gang rape. First we got was a Vishakha directive, and now we have this law. Section 509 involves using word, gesture, or acts that are intended to insult or offend women's modesty. This language itself has a lot of problem, and I think Supreme Court of India has recently given a directive or come up with the handbook that what kind of language should be used in the court by the lawyers as well as judges in the judgment. Institutional mechanism to address instances of sexual harassment and training of functionaries, they are appointed, and that's what the law demands from all the employers. We also had India adopted unanimously, our parliament adopted women empowerment policy with 4 aspects of welfare, access, conscientization, and participation. I think it is self-explanatory. The policy is very crisp, and it has a life cycle approach. It is available in all Indian languages. You can download it easily from the internet. PCPNDT Act, about which when the campaign against sex-selective abortion started, and a lot of documentation was provided, and a lot of legal workshops were also held. Finally, we got PNDT Act in Maharashtra in 1988. Then people started going to neighboring states. So we had a PNDT Act in Gujarat and PNDT Act in Karnataka. But what was required was a National Umbrella Act. And finally, in 1994, we got the PNDT Act applicable to the whole of India. But it had many loopholes, and the public interest litigation was filed by Sehat and Masoom and Dr. Sabu George, who was himself a nutritionist. And when he had gone to do his field work in Tamil Nadu, he saw so many babies being abandoned, thrown in the garbage. They were the small, newly born babies. And he decided to give up his career and concentrate on Save the Girl Child. In fact, the whole Save the Girl Child slogan that we have, that was his, he had coined it. So PNDT Act 2002 is now also applicable. Some of the states are quite proactive in its implementation, but there is a massive connivance of the authorities and the diagnostic center owners, and that's why we see there is a lot of loophole at the operational level. Lot of problems are there, and now also we see UNFPA report shows that sex ratio has become even more adverse. Currently, we don't have data, but during the pandemic, PCPNDT Act was also freezed, which resulted in a massive abuse of technologies, ultrasound technologies for selective elimination of female fetus. A Transgender Persons Protection of Right 2019. It is an act of parliament which was hurriedly passed, and it has so many limitations. Transgender community is extremely angry with this act because there is a less punishment for rape if for transgender person. Generally, when the gang rape or a rape of a woman or a child takes place, 7.5 years of rigorous punishment is given. We saw even in case of, say, first anti-rape campaign we had in solidarity for Mathura. In that also we had seen that the Bombay High Court had given 10 years of rigorous imprisonment to the policeman who had raped Mathura. But in case of transgender person, it's only 2 years of jail imprisonment. Moreover, this act doesn't make any commitment about the developmental needs of transgender persons who are abandoned by their own family members, biological family members. So no reservation for job, nothing, no provision for their educational needs, their housing, the elderly transgender persons' pension, or their livelihood needs. No commitment is made by this law, and that's why there is a lot of now also lot of anger, and there are several public interest litigations filed by the transgender communities organizations. What we see that after the pandemic, so many evils which we thought that we were successful in addressing them have now resurged. Child marriage, child trafficking, forced child labor, children being forced out of education happened massively during the 2 years of pandemic. And it reminded us of what struggle was waged way back in 1884 by person like social reformers had done it, and what they wrote about this wicked practice of child marriage has destroyed happiness of my life. It comes between me and things which I prize above all others. Study, mental cultivation. Without least fault of mine, I am doomed to seclusion. Even every aspiration of mine is looked down upon with suspicion and is interpreted in most uncharitable manner. This was a girl, Rakmabai Save, who was married as a child, and her husband was Rakmabai was a very studious person. She had highly cultivated mental faculty, and that boy was not a match, and she refused to cohabit with her husband, and she's the massive national level polarization of public opinion took place, and there were those who were revivalists who said that Ratmabai was challenging the Indian custom for a Hindu woman once the husband is the marriage is solemnized. Husband is her husband for 7 lives. How can Ratmabai not go to her husband? And if she does this, then she should be imprisoned. Ratmabai, she said that she was ready to be imprisoned, but she would never cohabit with that man who was no match for her, who was not, was a very crude, and he was in a bad habits. And finally, this letter which she wrote to Viceroy of India was published in a front page of Times of India. And Viceroy declared that she should not be imprisoned. Ratmabai became a doctor. She served till the age of 96. She was a freedom fighter. She established so many medical colleges in civil hospital in Pune, civil hospital in Surat, civil hospital in Rajkot, where all the progressive kings invited her to provide medical services. So we can see that whenever there is a little support by the system, by the individuals, women who are facing gender-based violence can flourish. Luckily for Ratmabai, even her stepfather, because her mother became widow when she was very young. The stepfather was also very progressive and supported her education. What we see, these are the pictures of the pandemic. At the time of pandemic, the cruelties which happened in terms of violation of PCP-NDT Act, or child marriages, or forced child labor, or trafficking on a massive scale, or massive domestic violence. I think we have a major challenge now to make a concerted effort to fight all these evil practices. In fact, people say that the wheels of history have turned back in a backward direction. We have to really make extra effort, 3 times more effort, to see to it that whatever we achieved in the social reform movement, in the freedom movement, during the 70s and 80s, because of the women's rights movement, is very important. Legal awareness about violence against women, we all are doing. But now we need to create the structures and systems which can provide very important support system for the survivors of violence, and see to it that the violence against women is prevented in a big way. There are newer issues, newer challenges we are facing now. Is a witch hunting in a big way, honor crimes, they are also, and the cyberbullying. These are the new issues in last 3, 4, 5 years we are seeing escalated on a big scale. Even the NRI marriages, what happens to women who get married. Earlier, NRI marriages were located only in Punjab and Gujarat, but now we see that from 6 southern states also women are marrying. They are in a great trouble once they go to the newer destination, they leave India. So even we need to create the legal protection for the women who are suffering in other countries, and we have to do the sensitization of our embassies also. Home Ministry has recorded more than 12,000 complaints from the women who are duped, cheated, and brutalized in the NRI marriages. Me Too movement, we have learned over last 5, 7 years, Me Too movement has caught the attention of the women's movement and the policymakers. People are using, when you don't get justice through the existing structures, you use the social media. So many testimonies of sexual harassment in the film industry, in the media, in the judiciary, for the interns, legal interns, or in the academic world, or in the informal sector. Women have given their testimony through social media, and we need to be very sympathetic to women who are giving their testimony. We have to stand by them, and we have to see to it that it is basically the people in power who are completely insensitive, and as a result of which young women, young entrant in the career, they face so much of harassment, but they don't get any redressal, and that's why they are using social media. So Me Too movement is not women against men. Me Too movement is all of us against the toxic patriarchy. What we see, the cyber violence is a newer form of violence. We need to have a more and more awareness about cyber violence. We saw the phenomena of boys' locker room in Bombay, also in one of the most schools, international schools where the richest people's children go. Same happened in Mumbai, in Delhi also. So I think the shadow pandemic of toxic patriarchy that we need to fight in all the forms, and we need to create the helplines the way the responses, certain state governments responded by creating helplines which were active throughout the day and night. I think that is very important. We need to understand this whole issue of violence against women, whether it is in domestic arena or in the public life. So we need to be aware about it. We have to see the interconnections between individual incident of violence and how the systems and structures, they respond to this kind of violence. We need to create more and more specific, issue-specific helplines, the way women's movement created it immediately after declaration of lockdown during the pandemic. So it is not only during the pandemic, but in a post-pandemic period also, we need such helplines, more so in the regional language. So it is, and we also need to create the various methods. If the survivor of violence cannot speak because of the proximity of the abuser, then we need to create various ways of doing handholding of the survivor. And we need to understand that if we don't take phenomena such as boys' locker room or the jokes which we are getting, rape jokes we are getting in the WhatsApp or Instagram, or the political leaders talking about boys will be boys and the men are hunter and women are prey, that kind of sexist, homophobic or transphobic jokes and objectification, if we don't stop them in the initial phase and confront them, then what will happen? Our gender roles will be solidified. Glass ceilings at workplaces, gender stereotypes in the every life, whether it's in education or politics or in community, will persist. Stalking, teasing, revenge porn, rape, threat, harassment will be completely ignored. And if we don't challenge that also, then ultimately it would happen into rape or sexual coercion and physical abuse, and also finally even the murder of a victim, because that's what is happening now. You can see more and more young girls below 18, they are the ones who are targeted by the predators and they are also killed to kill the evidences. So I think we need to understand these interconnections and fight at the nobody can have a casual way of dealing with gender-based violence. These are the cyber crimes that are happening, and we need to create more awareness about it. And we also need to make the legal awareness as a mandatory in all the training programs of the trade unions, of political parties, of our educational institutions, right from schools and even in parent-teachers meeting, we need to have. And that is why I think we need to, this is a letter written by a man, that violence against women is a man's issue. It is not only a women's issue. Every responsible citizen has to respond to it. What we saw during the migration also, the reverse migration, women faced massive violence, which was not even recorded by the criminal justice system. It is only the women's organizations and the trade unions and SHGs where they gave their testimony of the miseries they fought, violation of their reproductive rights that they faced. I think we should never forget this, because so that in future, whenever such thing happens, we are able to combat it more effectively. Instead of curbing women's mobility, we should curb violence against women, and we should take preventive measures against it. These are some of the important reports prepared by several women's groups collectively. So they shared their data of providing support to survivors of violence during the pandemic, and they have come up with the reports which are in the public domain. All these 6 reports which I have quoted, they were prepared after 2020, and they have shared their experiences, and they can be extremely useful to come out with our own action plan for combating violence against women. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your invaluable insights and for delving into the foundational aspects of this critical issue and providing us with the essential context and the perspectives. So now the floor is open for questions from the audience. Anyone in the audience can raise their hands, or they can type their questions in the Q&A box.
Ishmeet Kaur says that will we get PPT being shared? Definitely. I'll share it right away. Yeah.
So anyone in the audience have any question? Can either raise their hand or type in the Q&A box. Or else, ma'am, I have a small question.
Yeah.
So since you mentioned about the cyberbullying and the rise in crime against women because of the exposure to online content, I would say. So I was reading somewhere that there has been a 40% rise in the sex trafficking, that the victims are recruited through online mode.
Yes.
So you mentioned about the helpline number. Despite that, are there any measures that are being taken for the companies that can help us in preventing and addressing the gender-based violence that are occurring because of that online platforms, or how we can hold those companies accountable for fostering safe online environments?
Yeah.
Because technology has become a new normal. We can't get rid of it.
Correct. So I think it's not only companies, but even they are targeting more and more adolescent girls, no? So even the educational institutions and the community-based organizations, civil society organization, all of them have to join this movement, because children are accessing these web portals even in the homes, no? And they get, so you see, if you see the individual testimonies of these young girls who have been trafficked, or who are called by, invited by their boyfriend to attend party, and then they are given less drink, and then they are raped, and all these things are happening even at home. So I think even in PTA meeting, parent teachers associations meeting, also it has to be discussed. And the way National Commission for Women had started a massive training programs throughout the pandemic period. Now they have stopped, but in 2021, there were lots of programs. All colleges were told, and we were inviting the cyber police, cyber crime branch, no, to educate and orient the young people, both boys and girls. Boys can also be trafficked. So I think that kind of capacity building has to be done by everybody, not only employers, because employers, they are basically major people, and working people, they get targeted for cheating and fraud. But when it comes to sexual crime, trafficking, selling a person, it happens with the housewives, it happens with the people who are desirous of going abroad and work. So that there's so many nurses, they were also trafficked, no, to the Gulf countries. After going there, they were badly abused. They were recruited as nurses, but they were taken. The website was so attractive that nurses applied online, and they were given a very rosy picture of the destination. And after they reached there, it was nothing. They were forced into sexual work and slavery and domestic work, and brutalized also very badly. So it is happening. So it is all pervasive. What I want to say is that not only employers who have to do that, but yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Natty here.
Yeah, Natty.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask more highlight on toxic patriarchy, like different, because you have covered quite a wide range from ancient time to now, how the violence has come up. So that was something very means we could learn from, but just a little more highlight on a toxic patriarchy.
Yes, see, there are, one can be liberal patriarchy, okay, that I allow my daughter to study, I allow my wife to work, I'm patriarchal, but whenever she's ill, I cook. That's a liberal patriarchy. Then you have what you call benevolent patriarchy. So all the social reformers of 19th century, they were benevolent patriarch, because otherwise the toxic patriarchy of that time would not even allow women to have widows to have a dignified life, or they would ask them to burn, that widows should be burned, who believe in double standard of sexual morality, who believe that to tame women and to make them ideal women, you have to use violence. Okay, so that is a teaching them lesson continuously and showing them their place, where your place is. That is a toxic patriarchy. Then you also have a vicarious patriarchy, that you see that vicarious patriarchy you see more in WhatsApp groups, no? That I am scared of my wife, I won't say anything, but I will be very happy when someone else beats them up, no? So she deserves it. Good, usko sabak sikhaya. Taming of the shrew, if you talk about, no, like Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, it is very much of a vicarious patriarchy. Toxic patriarchy is one that it is never, there is no sense of guilt. They gloat in their abusive power. That is toxic. It's like a nashe mein dhut pitru satta, no? That you don't even feel that in so many testimonies. I think you, Nati, you also must have, when we go to the prison, and the rapist who has no qualm about what he had done, heinous crime, no? In fact, the Shakti Mill case, all those 6 boys, when they were interviewed by the counselor, there was no sense of guilt. They did not feel that they had done anything wrong. The same thing, I think, Nirbhaya case also, all those boys, they did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. They internalized it in such a way. And Shakti Mill boys, they also said in the past also they had done it, but nobody had questioned them. So,
ma'am, I have a question.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Pallavi, and I wanted to ask, and thank you for your invaluable, insight on this area. I just wanted to know this one thing, is that we have been hearing of the term reproductive justice so much.
Yeah.
And my question is that, can we or should we problematize the term justice? Because whenever we talk about justice, there always that center margin conversation that comes up, as in who serves the justice and who is being served. We have penal codes.
Yeah.
I mean, the term itself is very, phallocentric. So my question is that, should we also be very critical about using words like reproductive justice? Because the Supreme Court or whoever serves the justice also does not exist in a social vacuum. They are very much conditioned by so many factors around them. So I just wanted your opinion on that. What do you think?
What would be the alternative to justice? What would be the other term? Rights, yes, reproductive rights we say. But when a woman is forced to abort a female fetus, doesn't it become a issue of reproductive justice? Or a court which would totally neglect, like if you see so many judgments in which a girl child is raped and judge, even a woman judge, she says that we can't imprison the boy because not man, because he's a sole breadwinner and he has old parents to look after, without talking about a word about the pain of this girl and what are the consequences this survivor of rape will have to face. Flavia is here with us. Flavia, can you delve on this subject? Is there any other better term for reproductive?
Actually, we are so used to using the word justice, and we can't think beyond it. And I think the core issue here is justice. Because what the girl demands is not mercy, not benevolence, but her right as an individual, as a citizen, under the constitution. She has to be treated equally, and she has to be treated with respect. So in this context, the word that we can think of is only justice and rights. These go together, justice and rights. Apart from that, we don't want benevolence. We don't want mercy. We don't want gratitude from the state, from a patriarchal state. We want to be treated as equal citizens. And that's our right under the Constitution. Hence the word rights and justice.
Yeah. Manish Kumarji.
Yeah, ma'am, I've typed the question also. I
Yeah.
was asking, like, despite the reservation women are getting in politics, like in Panchayati Raj elections, still in northern parts of India, we see the concepts like Pati Pratinidhi, where male members are taking decision despite women. So, what are the solutions to it? Like, what are the way forward so that women can take the decisions on their own?
The recent study of UNDP has shown that in 46% of elected representatives are taking their own decision. Okay. It is 54% still have this, what you call Sarpanch Pati. But here also I see sexism, because even male elected representatives in so many times, they are not taking independent decision. They are taking whatever their party bosses or their personal interest, if they, the villages and all, whatever the patriarch of their family they shares. But we don't call them puppets. Only when it comes to women, we call them puppets. No. So here also that bias is there. But the recent study has shown, because now we have had 6 rounds of local self-government elections, because the law came in 1994, and in last 30 years there have been 6 rounds of elections, and the new leadership that has happened, when in a history women were not even allowed to take part in public life. At least during the freedom movement, at least women fought against British rule, and common women also came out on the streets, and that helped giving up parda and come in the public life. But with throughout the civilization, women were not given place in the public life, and first time they are getting it in 1994 due to 73rd and 74th amendment. And then instead of holding their hand in enhancing their capacity, governance is a complex issue, definitely, for anybody, and for continuous hand-holding is required. We would always deride them as a Sarpanchpati, no? That is really sad. And people like us, myself, Flavia, all of us, Shaluji, all of us, we do always do the training of women who are in the elected representative. We started way back in 1994, and some of these women corporators, they are so articulate. Even during the pandemic, we saw they were in the front. They were going to their constituency. They were not holding only Zoom call meetings. No, they were actually going and supporting and using their area development fund. In Bombay, it is 1 crore per year, and they use their fund also for providing support to the for this. So I think creation of enabling environment is most important, which state and non-state actors both will have to do. State will also have to enhance the capacity building program and also provide protection. When the Chalo Delhi campaign, where 5,000 women elected representatives went from their villages to Delhi, they had a 12-point program. They demanded, they needed helpline, they needed adequate fund. Why do we treat women in the local self-government bodies as beggars? All the funds is cornered by the state government. Why can't they? So I think when we talk about democratic decentralization, it has to be backed by funding so that they can nurture their community. Unless you nurture your community and you develop your community, nobody will respect you. So that is very important. So, and even capacity of all the how to write proposals and how to do double entry accounts and how to make revenue accounts and expenditure accounts and balance sheet and all those things which are very important. Like Rajasthan, we saw Rajasthan passed a resolution that they would allow only 12th pass women to contest election. And now you have a very young women, BA, MA, MBA, CA, all of them are elected in Gram Sabha and Panchayat and Pradhan. Scenario has changed. They are self-dependent. They decide their own agenda. So I think we need to create that kind of environment, both the government as well as the non-government organizations and educational institutions. It's very important and valid question. Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Dr. Simreen. Ma'am, it's just an observation, maybe I'm wrong, but what I felt is when we are dealing DV Act at the grassroots level, we don't have immediate solution for our, the victim per se. So being a law teacher, being part of our own legal aid committee and all, we go to a lot of villages and everywhere. And every time when I go there and I see that, there are women who are really suffering, but they are scared because we cannot provide them with immediate solutions. So the DV Act itself, don't we think that even after 20 years, we lack in something, kind of a relief to the women per se, after an investigation and everything we can provide her. But what instead of, something called as that something or something we can provide to her, especially in smaller cities. For example, in Mumbai, Delhi, or Pune, or let's suppose Bangalore, we have things. But what about small places near Lucknow, like Rai Bareli or places like that?
Yeah, I think this is the question to be directed to Flavia, because that's what her presentation is going to be.
Ma'am, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Ishmeet. I'm from Central University of Gujarat. Basically, I mean, I have a very basic question. When it comes to women, about women's right, women themselves are quite divided, when it comes to property rights or even when it comes to stigmas around menstruation. It's the women who are like, in fact, promoting, the stigmas around menstruation. So the question basically is, how do we reach out to women? Because it's a very complicated thing. I mean, there are different sectors of women, different kinds of classes, castes. Middle class, I think, is a space where there is least awareness in that sense. One is in their comfort zone. So how could one, reach out, or what could one do about it?
So I think first thing is that you try to do awareness generation, but still there will be women who would be taking very, very misogynist. They would have internalized misogyny and violence against girls and women. So you for that, I think we have to combat, we have to fast, and we have to do the hand holding of the targets. Okay, so that is one, and that's what women's movement has done always. So whether it is in a question of mother-in-law harassing daughter-in-law, or this menstrual, currently so many young couples, they are fighting against this stigma of menstruation. Tribal women, first generation of educated tribal girls. I attended a meeting in Kolhapur where they had a meeting of women activists and Anganwadi workers, Asha workers from all over Maharashtra. These young women, they are opposing. They say that they can't be thrown out of the village during their menstruation because they create they build one hut in which they have to say. It is very risky for them to be there for 5 days. So many of them, they get bitten by snake and scorpion. Most of the tribal villages now are not isolated. either the state highway or the national highway passes there. So truckers also know that here is a hut and there may be some girl or a woman. So they are opposing. So internally also a lot of protest is coming up about this kind of a misogynistic behavior. And we have to do the hand-holding and support them. And I think criminal justice system is also has to respond to the this kind of violation. Awareness, yes, that is always we do, but still there are some hardcore who would not accept the progressive stance, and we have to take sides of those who are at the receiving end of violence.
I just want to add something here.
Yeah, Flavia.
You know, when we talk about women, we talk about women as a category. But when we talk about men, we don't talk men as a category. We see men are fighting against men. We don't say that. Everywhere, all wars are created by men. And men are fighting against men.
Correct.
When it comes to women, we think all women are same. They don't have categories.
Yeah.
There's no class. There's no caste. There is no other divides of the village, within the village, etc. And we think why women are fighting. Even class as mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, they belong to a different class within the patriarchy. So we cannot think of women as a unit. And we cannot raise this question why women are against women. Everybody is against everybody. Even in the family, two sisters fight, or mother and daughter fight. So everywhere you will see it. So you cannot say why women are against women. Women are bound to be against women. But we need to look at oppression. We need to look at power structures, oppressive power structures, and then position ourselves to see how we can help a particular woman. So you don't have to belong to women's movement. When you see oppression anywhere, men or women can help better. So it's not only the domain of the women, but it's a domain of the society as a whole.
That ma'am said, my larger question is basically about, when it comes to othering in the sense of tribal communities, like ma'am has given an example, of women being sent to sheds and shelter houses outside, their homes. The larger problem is within the family units, where, and particularly this question of menstruation, where the mother is teaching the girl to not to pray or to sleep on floor, and the mother is not being able to even give it up because of certain kind of cultural and religious, beliefs which she really believes in. And that's happening even today. I mean, a lot of, students in the university, both PG students and PhD students, come and say that, our mothers are doing this to us, right? How do we overcome that? So that's, I mean, it's not just about women fighting against women, but it's more kind of something which they have internalized, and they're not able to recognize that, that is going against us.
So there is also fear of social ostracization. That is also there.
Yes.
The community caste, the structures are so powerful. So that is also there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, there is one question in the chat.
Yeah,
I just read out the question.
Pallavi Girolkar. Would you like to unmute and speak, Pallavi ji? Yeah, you can read out.
Yeah, I just read out. So, ma'am, basically, she is asking what, in your understanding, is the gap in spreading awareness and making young girls comfortable to share and register the violence they face in schools, coaching centers, and also in their own families sometimes. And what are the requirements to make their families, and especially mothers, to support their children?
Yeah, I think that's what we have been doing right from the beginning of the women's movement, that in schools, the safe touch, unsafe touch, and also speaking out that the sense of shame should not be there. And we need to discuss it in PTA, parent teachers meeting, also PTA meeting, which are now mandatory, okay, for every school and educational institution, to be sympathetic, because why do children don't tell, whether it's a boy or a girl, when they face any kind of sexual aggression, they confide to teacher, they confide to counselor, but they don't confide to their parents. So democratization of family, create an ecosystem, create an atmosphere in the family where children feel safe to tell their parents, no, and parents should stand by, and wherever it happens, action is taken. Most of the cases of children who have who have been supported by their parents, they have been able to combat it. Otherwise, they suffer in silence. So I think we need to also do the council, all in the schools. Yes, schools and this thing, child sex, more awareness about POCSO Act, not only by telling them what the law is, but also showing the films, showing dealing case studies, writing say essays, essay competition, poster competition about the issues of my body, my right, or the what do we mean by safe touch and unsafe touch. So this is a way we can do the consciousness among the teachers and students. It should be part of the refresher course, orientation program, faculty induction program, faculty development program, both in schools and colleges. And also now the WDCs have been established in the college, this thing. So there it should be there, because junior college students are below 18. They are 16, 17-year-old. So it's very, very important. And
yeah, thank you, ma'am. I think you have addressed almost all the questions and queries. Rest we can take after the session.
yeah.
So thank you, ma'am, for guiding us through our first session and patiently answering all the questions. So there is a little bit change in the structure. We will be now going to Flavia, ma'am, and then we will be coming to the Shalu, ma'am. Is that fine with you, ma'am? Shalu, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Okay. So with this, we now move on to our next session, that is on the role of policies in addressing gender-based violence, and an overview on the same by Advocate Dr. Flavia ma'am, who is a women rights lawyer and a co-founder of Majlis Legal Center, Mumbai. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vibhuti, for having me in this inaugural lecture. I'm very grateful to you. And it's a very important subject. Firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm part of the women's movement. And my entire life has been in the public campaigns along with Vibhuti. And both of us have been very important activists in the women's movement, in addition to what else we do academically or professionally. So my entire issue has been law reform, gender-based violence and law reform. When the women's movement started, it started specifically about a rape case. Now, before that, let me tell you two things. You must have, which is in the news today, you must have heard about the Jharkhand rape case. A foreigner woman, Spanish woman, I think, was raped by 7 men. And investigations are going on. 3 men have been arrested. 4 are yet to be arrested. They have been identified but not arrested yet because they cannot be traced. And I've been receiving so many calls to comment on it. Why women are raped? Why foreigner women are raped? And one has no answer. Because we've been with this campaign since 1980. And I'm not saying there are no changes. There are a lot of changes. Yet rapes continue. And children are vulnerable. Foreigners are vulnerable. Women in general are vulnerable. And this law acts very slowly and is not proven to be a deterrent. Though efforts are being made, it's not really deterrent. So this is one issue that is today topical about this rape of this foreigner woman. And a lot of media attention has put on this. The second major issue that is there today, topic of discussion, is France has made the right to abortion a constitutional right. And there have been a lot of discussion on that it cannot be reversed. It cannot be rolled back, no matter which government comes, because it is made part of the constitution. And with the overwhelming majority, I think in the whole legislation, only 72 people opposed it. more than 370 people have supported it. And this is a very important landmark on the eve of the women's movement. So I just want to flag these issues. One is about reproductive rights, my body, my choice, my right over my own body. So this is very, very important. So I'll just flag this issue. And I want to indicate that the issues that we started with the campaign and addressing public policy, law reform, bringing in newer legislations, etc., has been a very important campaign for us, very important starter. But the struggle has to go on. It's not ended. When you see issues like this, you see that it is not ended. It's a continuous struggle. And not only our generation, next generation, and even the next generation after that, all of us have to struggle to get this done. So let me talk about the campaign for law reform, which has been an important plank of the women's movement. So this is the background. So let me address some of the crucial issues here. Firstly, the rape, anti-rape movement. Among all the movements, the most consistent movement has been the anti-rape movement, started way back in 1980 with a need for law reform. So you might know about the Mathura rape case. She was a young tribal girl of 16 years, around 15, 16 years. She was raped inside the police station by two policemen on duty. And a complaint was registered because of the pressure from her family members. She was poor, she was illiterate, she was an orphan. She was working as a maid servant in somebody's house. And she was raped by the boy of that house itself. But due to the support person that she had, particularly her brother, her neighbors who were waiting for her, a case was registered. The Sessions Court gave a verdict that this was consent and it was not rape. Because this woman was of easy virtue, they said, because she had eloped with a boy. She had a boyfriend. She was a tribal girl, 15, 16-year-old. But they said because she's not of good moral character, she cannot be raped. This is what the Sessions Court verdict was. Because of the public pressure from the women's groups, it was one of the first cases taken up by women's groups. Particularly, it is the case in Maharashtra, Nagpur side, Gadchiroli. So then, when it went to High Court reversed the judgment and convicted the policeman. The policeman went to Supreme Court. And in the Supreme Court, in 1978, the verdict came, reversing the High Court judgment, holding that Mathura's statement is not trustworthy. She again reaffirming that she is not a woman of good character. For us, for the women's movement, this was a very important point, that how can the Supreme Court think like this? Because as we know, Supreme Court judgments are the law of the land. So if the Supreme Court thinks like this about women, that also in such a vulnerable position as opposed to a policeman on duty, then what was going to be the plight of the rest of the women? So this was taken up due to a letter written by 4 law teachers. But the women's movement took it up majorly. And 1980, March 8th, was marked as a anti-rape law day. So after that, there was a demand for changes in the rape law with consistent campaign. And in 1983, the rape law was changed. The rape law was changed by marking certain minimum punishment, that 7 years for ordinary rape, gang rape for rapes in special situations, like pregnant woman, child under 12 years, such other custodial, the one, if the woman is in a shelter home or a public hospital and there she's raped, etc., that it would be 10 years minimum punishment. So that was a big victory. There was also said that a victim's name should not be published. And publishing any name and identity publishing became an offense. So this was the major points then. But over the years, we see, till today also we see, the law has not had the desired impact. The acquittals are major, more than 70-80% are acquittals. Even when a case is reported, only about 20-25% are convictions. But more than that, most cases are not even reported. Unless a case like this, today's Jharkhand rape case comes up, historical, notorious, inviting public attention, etc. Most cases are not registered. And if a rape happens within the family, it is totally ignored. So this is the situation for us where rape is concerned. And there have been so many adverse judgments. The judiciary has been extremely hostile to women, always siding with the accused. So excuses are given that the accused is the sole breadwinner of the family. He's a very young member of the family. He's a juvenile, etc. And no sufficient attention is given to the victim. And there's always suspicion about the victim. She must have told lies. She must have implicated somebody. She must have consented and then she changed her mind. So these are all the biases that operate in our courts. Even today, if you see that, go and sit in a trial court and see how a rape trial takes place. And what are the questions the defense lawyer asks this young girl, and she has no support. She has absolutely no support. The public prosecutor who is supposed to defend her is least interested. And she has to face a defense lawyer who is very well versed in criminal law. The woman can be an illiterate woman. She can be a child. She can be a rural woman who doesn't understand the court and the procedures. Nobody is there to explain to her. So it is very unevenly balanced. And it's no wonder it results in acquittals. Unless there is support network, we cannot get conviction. So Madlis, the organization that I started, provides legal support to victims, particularly child victims. And from the time of the FIR, our team stands with her. Till she comes to court and give evidence, at least she'll have somebody who is supporting her throughout the trial. And with that, we have managed to increase the conviction rate. This is one of the important works of Madlis. And in 2005, we got the POXO Act. 2012, we got the POXO Act, which is Protection of Children Against Sexual Violence Act. Now here, children now are taken out of the IPC, criminal law, and they're placed under the special law. Now what's special about this law? Because there is a child-friendly procedure you must follow. The way the investigations are done by a police officer should be in a child-friendly manner. The police officer should not be in uniform. Preferably a woman police officer should be investigating. The courts are specially designed. Preferably a woman judge. If there's no woman judge, at least a very sensitive and sympathetic male judge. And the support person has to be there. The Child Welfare Committee can appoint a support person to be with the victim. So these are the changes that we have brought about. But even then, it is not satisfying. Even then, we are not getting results. But it has been very, very difficult journey for us. Now with this law, one important thing is that supposing a doctor finds out that a child is sexually abused, doctor is mandated to report. If a teacher finds out through the child's conduct behavior in school that she is undergoing trauma at home, and she's been sexually abused by her own father or brother or uncle, etc., even the teacher is mandated to report. So with this, a lot of cases are now coming up of family abuse. Young children are subjected, male or female. This law applies to males and females under the age of 18. So, one negative point is here that even consensual sex is not allowed under 18. So that also is getting punished and it can be reported. So where it happens, where it comes to know is where usually this child is pregnant. And then she is taken to the hospital. She's not aware that she's pregnant. And through that, even a consensual sex comes to light. And then the case is filed. So this law is very draconian in some sense, but it was necessary to bring these cases out in the open. Without it, we will not be able to detect many cases. So this has been our experience. And we have, particularly as Majlis lawyers, our duty is to support these child victims, particularly, help them at every stage, make them understand what is a criminal court, make them understand what is a trial, criminal trial, and how they have to respond, or more importantly, what is there in the FIR. And that FIR, on that FIR, she's asked questions, but she doesn't know what is written in the FIR. She's illiterate. Police have recorded this. She has no access to documents. So our duty is to understand all this, to explain to the girl what is there in the FIR, and to train her as to what kind of questions can be asked so that she is able to answer these questions. This trial is such a traumatizing experience. Even if any of you are placed in the court and are asked to answer questions, you will not be able to. It is extremely difficult and the case will fail. So this is where we have identified the major problem and we have tried to rectify it. So this is about the rape and sexual abuse cases, both within the IPC and under the POXO Act. So the POXO Act is a very important landmark in our whole history of anti-rape campaign. And it's only because of child rights groups and women's rights groups that we have this law in place today. But unfortunately, a lot of people are not aware of it. And unless there's a problem in our personal life, we are not concerned about what happens, where is the law reform happening, how it is affecting us, how it is affecting the society, how it is affecting the neighbors or relatives or near and dear ones. We're not bothered. We just try to understand only the superficiality, what comes in the newspapers, headlines, etc. But otherwise, we're not concerned what to do. In fact, in a lot of cases, people ask us, what should we do? How should we report? Doctors and police are not recording the case. What should we do? Where should we go? So these are some important issues we need to understand. So I'll move to the next issue. Excuse me. So another major issue of the women's movement, as somebody mentioned earlier, is dowry harassment and domestic violence. So in 1980s, apart from rape, the news highlights used to be, a term was used called dowry death. Particularly in the North Indian cities, a girl would be burnt soon after her marriage. And when she's burnt, we would call it a dowry death. And a criminal law was amended. So again, there was a demand for rape law reform, domestic violence reform. So 498A was brought in, where family violence was recognized for the first time. And it was punished. There was a law for this called 498A, It's got a lot of badnaam, so to say, but it was a very important legislation that domestic violence was addressed as dowry harassment, not as domestic violence. And our husband's family could be charged with harassing the woman with the demand of dowry. And there was another amendment, 304B, if a woman dies an unnatural death within 7 years of her marriage, then it will be unnatural death. It would be implied that the husband family is responsible for this. And the burden of proof would be on them that they didn't do it, rather than on the girl's family or the police that they did it. Now, this is reversing the major principle of criminal law, because under criminal law, an offense has to be proved by the prosecution. The defense doesn't have to do anything. But in this case, when the girl died in her husband's home, it was impossible to prove it because the family would not report it before that she's being harassed. There would be no letters, no nothing. Only after she died, the family will come and say she was harassed and she was burnt. Even in a dying situation, women will not implicate their husbands because the small children at home, what will happen to them, etc. So it was a very precarious situation. So the rules of evidence got changed, and that prosecution didn't have to prove, the defense had to prove if there was a harassment earlier, if there were threats, if she was sent back. All these will come as evidence and leading to conviction. Even here, conviction was very less. Most of the cases, the bias within the judiciary was very high. Even though the woman has died, they would think that everybody is telling lies. The girl's family is telling lies, etc. And it continues till now, 498A, 304B, etc. as issues where women are not trusted, their families are not trusted. Now here we are under a dichotomy, because when she's suffering, when the marriage is on, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to break a marriage. So they will cover it. Supposing there's a dowry demand, she's sent back home, the family will prefer to meet that demand, give that additional money, give that ornaments or whatever, and save the marriage. So your basic premise is that marriage must be saved at any cost, and the girl must adjust. Now that thinking has not changed till now. It is the same thing. So the earlier question was there, why it doesn't happen, what happens after even when there is a Domestic Violence Act, etc. After much campaign, it was realized that the criminal law doesn't work, and we need a civil law. So in 2005, we got a civil law called Domestic Violence Act. So Domestic Violence Act is a civil remedy. So anybody who is harassed by her husband or in-laws, etc., can approach the court and ask for certain remedies, civil remedies. So there is no imprisonment here. Nobody is sent to jail. But the woman's rights are protected. Rights like court will grant an injunction that husband cannot harass her or in-laws cannot harass her. Protection from domestic violence. Protection from throwing her out of the matrimonial home. Maintenance for her. And child custody. These are the 5 remedies available under this act. And the proceedings are civil, but they are in the criminal court of magistrate court. Why so? Because civil courts are expensive. And magistrate court is the first court of the lowest degree, and where litigation are very expensive. There are also protection officers appointed who are supposed to help the woman. She doesn't have to go to a lawyer and pay money. These are government employees. The there is a format which is to, the protection officer can fill in about the date of marriage, addresses, etc., and the incidents of violence. How often she was harassed, where she was, how many times she was sent back, how what kind of harassment, etc. It's not a very formal petition. You can do a formal petition, but if you can't have a lawyer, you can do informally also filling up this form. So this is a landmark ruling, landmark law, which women's groups help to draft. And according to me, in all the laws, this is making us some sort of impact. So a lot of women are going to court. It's not arresting the husband or arresting the in-laws, but just protecting her rights. Protecting her rights to stay in that house, protecting her right to maintenance, protecting her rights not to be beaten, not to be traumatized in the husband's home. So this is very, very important. And a lot of cases that we get, when the women come and complain, my husband is harassing me, he's threatening me, he's threatening to throw me out, he's threatening to take my children away, etc. We find under this law. So that is worked not very well, but relatively well. And the law prescribes a time frame that within 6 months the case has to be decided. It doesn't happen in 6 months, but at least there is some pressure on the judiciary to decide the case very fast. So from the criminal case of 304B and 498A, we moved to the civil side and asking for remedies for the woman rather than punishment for the accused. So this is a big transition for us and for women in general. But most people are not aware what is a Domestic Violence Act, how does it protect women. So it's very important that we understand it. Then there are many other issues that have come up within the women's movement. The dowry law now has changed to domestic violence because all harassment is not dowry related. There, earlier the presumption was if a woman is harassed, it's the mother-in-law who is harassing her, and there is a demand for dowry. That's why she is harassed. With this premise, ordinary violence that is happening at home every day was not addressed at all. Emotional violence, mental trauma, all that is not addressed at all. So with the change in the definition of domestic violence, where we say sexual, emotional, financial, etc., even not giving maintenance, you can go under this act. Because that is also violence on the woman. So it is very wide and very, very helpful for the women to come under this act. Other issues that women's movement took up. Yeah, I've got a lot of case laws and all, but there's not time to go through the case law. 1986, there was a campaign to regarding commercial trafficking of women for this sexual act called Anti-Prostitution Act. So there are two types of prostitution. One is women, young girls are trafficked and sold into prostitution against their wishes, and they're kept there under the supervision or control of a so-called garwali or the mistress who is using their bodies to earn money. But there are others who are on their own, and with their own will, they want to do prostitution. So there are two kinds of debates that are going on. One is groups of or collectives of sex workers who are not forced into prostitution, but they say this is my body and I have a right to do what I want with my body. If I want to earn a living with using my body, I have the right to do so. But I have to be protected. I should have health protection. I should have a voter's card. I should be treated as a citizen. My children should have admission in schools, etc. So, to protect these rights, certain groups have been formed in some pockets, not everywhere. But this right is protected. On the other side, if you see in Bombay, we have a place called Kamatipura, where there are a lot of girls are kept captive. They're sold into prostitution, they're kept there. And that is prohibited by the law. And there is a punishment for procuring the girls, trafficking the girls, sending them abroad, keeping them in this prison-like cells, and somebody making money out of their bodies. Now, in such a situation, you hear about it, rescue operation by the police. The police go there, raid it, and rescue it. But the sad fact is there is a collusion between the police and the Garhwalis. It's not as apparent that police are always acting in favor of the victim girls. They are also hand in glove with the so-called Garhwalis and the traffickers. So that has been a problem area. There are some groups who are working on this, but this is a great issue that we had to work towards it, develop our understanding, develop why women get into prostitution, how they can come out of it, and what is the support they need. So this has been another campaign. Then there is another issue that came up, indecent representation of women. So this is in the media, posters, films, advertisement, where women's bodies are exposed. And for this, there is a law that indecent women cannot be represented indecently in public forums. And you can file a case against it. So this has been another issue that for us, yeah, I'll try to do something. We will see at a later stage. I'll coordinate with Vibhuti and see what we can do. Okay. So indecent representation, because my papers are very detailed, which is not necessary for you all. For you all, this much is more than enough, actually. There are a lot of case law, a lot of references, etc. So this campaign was very active in the 1980s. Most of these have been 1980 campaign. And a law was passed, making it a stringent offense that anybody uses a woman's body for viewing pleasure, obscenity, or public exposure of a woman's nude body, etc. So there is certain criteria developed. There were some groups who were opposed to this, that a woman's choice, she can expose her body if she wants. But in the women's movement, there was a resistance regarding that. And they said, no, we have to protect the woman as well as the general public. And even in the films, there's a censor board. Certain, if there is exposure, obscenity, etc., those scenes are cut. Only then they get a licensed censor certificate to view the film. So we all know about it. So this is indecent representation of women. So another very important issue that came up, which I want to highlight at this point, and this issue is still with us, called selective female feticide or female abortions. That when a pregnant woman is pregnant, you make her go through a sex determination test. And if it is found to be a female child, female fetus, doctors encourage you and family wants to abort, so that only male children are born. Female children are not born. So Vibhuti, myself, we were very active in this campaign. And a law was passed first in 1988 in Maharashtra. Then in 1994, all over India. The doctors are now prevented from conducting such tests. And all the radiology centers have to display very publicly that we don't do these tests, so that nobody can ask for it. And why this is so? Because our sex ratio is going down. Though females are supposed to be more in number than men, for 1,000 men, there should be more than 1,000 women. But in India, it is falling down. Particularly, it's falling down where people are more wealthy, because you have to pay money for it. So in Bombay, in Sholapur, etc., there are very less girls per 1,000 men. Sometimes it's come down to as less as 8 foot from 1,000. So, and there is a big racket going on, because doctors are trying to earn money by putting the fear of dowry in the minds of the families, saying that spend now 5,000 for a test, rather than spending 5 lakhs on dowry later. And the couples and the families fall for it. And this is, though the woman herself may want it, her family may want it, we think as a public issue, policy issue, this should not be there. And women should not be selectively killed through this procedure of a female feticide. Earlier, we used to do female infanticide. Infants were killed because they were girls. And this is the modern version of it, female feticide. So on that also, there was a lot of campaign, a lot of cases in the Supreme Court, etc. Maharashtra had an ordinance regulation in 1988 and 2000 and 1994, a central law was passed. But even then, it required a lot of monitoring so that actually it reaches the people. And doctors are made aware, and the doctors are punished. The woman herself is not punished, but her family is punished, and the doctors are punished. So this is the sex determination test, sex selective abortion. That's an important campaign that we had. So I think I've spoken quite extensively. And if there are questions, I will answer them.
Thank you so much, ma'am, thank you so much, ma'am, for this session. Your expertise and perspective have added tremendous values to our collective understanding of this crucial issue. So, before moving to the questions, I would like to call upon Professor Vibhuti, ma'am, to make her remarks on the session.
Flavia has explained step by step how to deal with the question of violence, and based on her first-hand experience. So I think that enhances the confidence of participants who are also active in different fields, that we can also bring the changes. During 80s and 90s, we did it collectively. So I think there is also a need to form the groups, women's collective or the women's organization, so that we can strike in a collective manner and bring effective results. So it's a very inspiring session that Flavia has given. And her legal experience and legal expertise has also played a very important role in providing very nuanced understanding on various types of gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now the floor is open for questions from the audience.
Yeah, so first question is by Ishmeet Kaur Chaudhary. Will you unmute and speak?
Yeah, ma'am, actually, some of these dowry deaths, I mean, some earlier, like these dowry deaths were quite prominent, but now they have definitely come down quite a bit. But at the same time, the repression has not decreased. So in some way, or in some fancy ways, the dowry is continuing to be, I mean, given out and all. So, so basically, this is kind of hidden forms in which, I mean, lavish parties or lavish weddings, and then giving out of gifts to daughters and others. So, so on one hand, we see a concrete law, and on the other hand, we see that the society is still promoting it, right? So there is kind of a gap in these two things, which I think needs to be addressed, and And I don't know like where to go in that sense, like how do we kind of read that? It's just like we comment, we observe, and then there's nothing that can be done about it. Or is there anything that can be done about it?
Okay, I want to respond to you in 2 different ways.
Mm.
I want to respond to the whole issue of dowry as a financial settlement. Now, most families give dowry because they don't give share in the property.
Mm.
So how do we ensure that girl gets something at least? So if we cannot be sure at all, because by will she is deprived of her rights. Now, after the 2005 amendment, at least all property could not be built away. But now Uttarakhand UCC has taken away that right also. So now all property can be built away. So now giving gift, why do parents give gift or money, etc. to the girl? I'm not talking about in-laws and husband, I'm talking about gifts to the girl. They give an AC, they give a car, they give a house, whatever they give. At least, but they should ensure that it is given in the girl's name, not in the husband's name, not in the husband's family's name. They don't do that. And that is the problem. So I have no problem with giving gifts to the daughter as against property rights. But the property rights are much more in value. So while we say no dowry should be given, simultaneously we have to say she should get equal right in property. But that doesn't happen at all. So dowry, this financial settlement for the girls is a very tricky issue. And somewhere women's movement has not addressed it correctly. That how do we ensure that girls get their share in the property?
Actually, that share in the property is something which is more substantial, and that is continuously being denied. You know, or
Absolutely.
or some parents want to just give 60-40 kind of a share. Okay, give 40 to
No,
the
they don't want to give anything. They just make
Yeah.
a bill, give her some gifts and
get over
yeah.
over it. That means, yeah.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah, Manish Kumar.
Ma'am, what proactive measures can policymakers take to strengthen the enforcement of gender violence policies and ensure the accountability within the governance structures?
See, there has to be a greater focus on implementation and monitoring that implementation by NGO groups. Most of the time, the campaigns are oriented regarding law reform. But subsequent to that, it's a long, lengthy procedure to ensure that implementation happens. Most of the time, implementation does not happen. The police are very lax. And the culprits are not booked at all. So it is important for a civil society, for people like us, to monitor the when we know about a case, we need to follow it up so that its implementation is proper. If the implementation is not proper, then we are not able to handle the situation. We are not able to get the conviction, which means the law will not act as a deterrent. So that's very important for to be very watchful of how the law gets implemented. And then, of course, there's so much badnaam that when a law gets implemented to whatever extent, there's always this whole thing about misuse. Women are misusing, etc. So we need to be very alert and we need to be very watchful. Nobody's talking about 80% of the cases not filed. Everybody talks about the 20% of the cases that are filed, where we say this is false case. So we are stuck between a false case and non-implementation. So we need to be very much hands-on here, so that this kind of misguidance and adverse propaganda is stopped. We always have to distrust the women. We think that women are misusing the law. At the other level, we say women are not using the law. They are not aware. Both can't be true. So we need to be very much alert and put proper facts out in the public. Write about it, be in the public domain, talk about it, etc., so that the true facts come to light.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, can I ask something? This is a very wonderful presentation. Both the presentations are very insightful. But just a small, maybe your insight on this. You talk about the POXO Act, but how people are not aware about it. But there is a kind of another level debate at another level, which says that the young girls who wanted to marry and their parents, if they don't want their girls to marry out of the caste or religion or whatever, so then they use POXO Act and rape laws and other laws. So how should we go about dealing with that kind of situation?
That is a very real concern. A lot of groups are talking about it. Consensual sex. Why do you penalize a consensual sex? When a girl and boy both want to be engaged, they can't get married because they are underage. It's under 18, but they can be in a relationship. But that is not allowed under POXO. So there is a debate whether consensual relationship should be taken out. But here the problem is, how do you judge consent? When a girl is 14, 15, and she is in a relationship, whether it is due to pressure or whether it is out of her free will, very difficult to judge. And sometimes she's pregnant. Then what do we do? So it's a very complicated issue. Madhlis has found that in most of the cases where the girl is pregnant, and when you say she's consent, she's sent to a home, she's kept there, her child is taken away, a lot of things happen. So how do we handle it? So we have dealt with such situations, and there are a lot of groups also saying that consensual relationships should be taken out of POXO, which has not happened right now. Some judges also have commented on this, is that you are harassing young people under this law. But there are pros and cons to the whole issue. It's not very simple.
Ma'am, I had a question.
Yeah.
Ma'am, so I'm Pallavi again. And first of all, it's so good to hear you speak again. The last session I attended of yours was at Ashoka University, where you were also a part of the Summer of Ish, session. So my question is that, can the language of law be kept deliberately ambiguous and complex in order to hinder easy understanding of it? And in that case, does accessing the law and legal measures not become a problem? And if so, what are the potential remedies to make access easy?
Can you shortly repeat it in a short form?
Yeah, sure. So my question is essentially that what is the relationship that is shared by law and language, shared between law and language? As in, the language of law tends to be complex at times, which makes it hard for, say, people who don't have access to good or so-called good language. It makes it very hard for them to avail or take recourse to legal measures. So my question is, how do we take steps towards that? How do we make access to law easy?
Actually, you are right. Absolutely, the language of law is extremely difficult. Even when a petition is filed, they make it so legal and complicated that you cannot understand your own petition. But nowadays, the trend is to make it more simple. Now, if you see the Domestic Violence Act, it's much more, the language is much more simple rather than a very complicated issue. So somewhere we need, I understand what you're saying about language of the law, and we need to simplify it. And it's
demystify also.
Demystify the law, make it more simple, make it more understanding for the people, for the ordinary people to understand. You should not need a lawyer to interpret it for you. You should be able to interpret it yourself, and you should know your rights. So it's a very valid question. And there are a lot of campaigns about it to make the law more simple and straightforward. So wherever there are complicated issues, NGOs like us bring out simple publications to demystify the law. So, and many law books are written, etc., but they are also written in a very complicated manner. So we need to really work towards making language of the law more simple.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for answering my question.
Can they
Very
be
nice
downloaded
question.
from Majlis website, the PDFs of these booklets?
I don't know. I will check.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I have one more question.
Yeah.
Like, since we are saying there is one more emerging vulnerable section of LGBTQ, except the women minority only. So there are individuals who may encounter hostile or unwelcoming environments in workplaces, be it schools or other spaces as well. And that can create a condition conducive to sexual harassment. And these discriminatory attitudes and behaviors contribute to a culture of impunity for perpetrators and a silence for victims. So what all steps we can take except for creating awareness so that these issues can be addressed properly?
LGBTQ issues are more recent and emerging issues. There are support groups there, and many LGBTQ people become part of these support groups who are there with them when their rights are violated. But I agree with you that a lot of couples are closeted. They don't want to come because there is a fear that what will happen when they come out. Even their own parents may not know. They may throw them out, etc. So we need to create a lot more awareness and protect their rights. And there's so much bias against same-sex relationships, gay couples, lesbian couples, etc. And we need to, very good question, and a very contemporary question. And there is a lot we need to do regarding this. We've not done sufficient. And particularly in women's group, there are certain pockets who are doing this. But generally, the women's movement have not addressed this sufficiently. So we need to address it much more. Very good question. I agree with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. If anyone from the participants have any question. Okay. So thank you, ma'am, for being with us here today and patiently answering all the questions.
Can we just answer the question about reading lists? We have already received the readings from the party. So they will be shared. No? Mr. Manish has asked. No? Just
Yes,
make an
ma'am. I
announcement.
received.
Yeah. Manish Kumar.
Ma'am, I received the mail.
Mail, no? Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, thank you, ma'am, for being with us here today and patiently answering all the questions. It was a pleasure to get insights from your valuable experience, and we wish to continue for more collaborations with you in future.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So now moving ahead, I would like to call upon Shalu, ma'am, for her brief overview over the session, that is violence against gender-based violence. Over to you, ma'am.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'll just it's a very small kind of thing which I just want to make. So this is about I just within past 2-3 days I read this news headline about this Bilkis Bano case. Many of you may have read this about this case in the social media, newspapers and TVs, and how it was very difficult for her to get the justice. She has to go to the Supreme Court, and finally, the convicts have been released on 15th of August on their good conduct by the Gujarat government. The Supreme Court said that it was wrong, and then again they were asked to complete their sentence, and now again. Two of them, like out of 11 convicts, 2 have applied for, to say that we need to quash this remission petition. So, these kind of, this kind of thing. And then ma'am has already shared this that how this foreign woman was raped. But my concern was this, the chairperson of the National Commission for Women, the way she responded to her, social media post. And it was again the culture of blaming the victim. Again, we are, raising. And though we say our country, the basics, the thing is that Atiti Devo Bhava, but instead of helping the victim, what we are, spreading the message. That is the concern I just want to flag here. And also this news I saw yesterday, where a person who is serving life imprisonment in a POSCO Act, and the women who are taking out rallies to demanding the release of the rape convict. And of course, there are other cases which I'm not going into the details, but we have seen in Manipur violence how women complaints are being ignored, and the actions are not being taken against the culprit. And I can go on and on. What we are seeing, and the National Crime Record Bureau data, which says released in December 2023, and it says that 51 cases of violence against women are being reported every year, and 4.4 lakh cases in 2022 were reported, and this is up by 4% in 2023. So these are the kind of things which are going on. But at the international level, on Women's Day, that is March of 8, for 2024, the theme is Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. They are talking about tackling economic disempowerment of women. Why they are talking about this? Because all over the world, the report says that 5% of government aid is focused on tackling violence against women, and less than 0.2% is directed towards prevention. And another point it says is that staggering 360 billion US dollars, there is a deficiency in that, in spending on gender equality measures. So and if this trend continues, the 340 million women and girls, that is 8% of world female population, will live in extreme poverty by 2030, and that the gender gap in power and leadership is also persisting, and it may take another 286 years to reach gender equality in public life. So what this International Women's Day, the action they are proposing is 5 key areas needing joint action. They say investing in women as a human right issue. They say they're talking about ending poverty, and they say that 75 million people have fallen into severe poverty since 2020. Immediate action is crucial to prevent women and girls who are 342 million, they are living in poverty, and we have to end that. And another point is implementing in gender responsive financing, shifting to green economy and care society, and supporting feminist change makers. So this is the very first day, and here I'm talking about considering the things which are going at the international level when they're talking about investing in women and girls, and the things which are happening nationally. The culture of impunity which is being created. So how can we achieve balance? In these kind of 2 different kind of situations. So, and we all have a role to play in ending gender-based violence. So how can we stop violence against women? So this program, basically, it's there to, we can share our, the kind of actions we are taking at ground level. So those people who want to present their, creative ideas, because last time we have this course, and a lot of new and good things have come up, a lot of creative ideas have come up. So I would request you to please come up with slogans there were songs, there were posters, very good posters. So, you can come up with all those ideas and you can share with us. So I'll just end here and with this quote, that we all know what the problems are. We all know what we have promised to achieve. What is needed now is not more of declaration or promises, but also action to fulfill the promises already made. So what action we are proposing to fulfill all those promises, that we have to think about. And I'll just stop here. So thank you, Bhanvi, for giving me this opportunity. I'll stop sharing my slide.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for making us aware with the empirical impacts and how serious this situation is and what all steps we need to take in this domain that is being neglected. Thank you so much, ma'am. So, with the chair's permission, we can start with the participants' introduction.
Yes.
We request the participants to kindly unmute themselves and introduce themselves by mentioning their name, organization's name, their academic or work background, and why they wanted to opt for this course. To take turns, kindly raise hands on the platform and we will call out your name.
Starting with Mr. Manish Kumar. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Manish Kumar. Currently, I'm a final year MA Sociology student pursuing from Central University of Haryana. So I chose this course because one reason is that we've been taught sociology of gender as a course, and also my dissertation topic hangs around it. I'm looking at the marriages and practices in tribes. So yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Natty, Professor Natty.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah. Introduce your work. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Natty. We Sakhya Women's Guidance Cell works for domestic violence from last 36 years. I am part of it from last 5 years.
Commendable work which Sakhya cell is doing in College of Social Work. That is one of the main persons.
Next, we can move to Ishmeet ji.
Yashmit ji, yeah, she is raised.
Yeah. My name is Dr. Ishmeet Kaur Chaudhary. I work in the Center for English Studies at Central University of Gujarat. My larger work has been on literature of the margins, and I worked on creating stories and particularly literature on 1984 anti-Sikh violence, where again, there were cases when women did not report about body molestation. There was not a single FIR registered, for those cases. And that was my interest, which got me particularly into women's studies, and now I teach women's studies and practice of writing. So I wanted to do this course primarily because somewhere I am in this quest of finding some kind of practical solution, or something where I can kind of contribute practically towards the lives of many women. That is my basic reason to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we can move to Pallavi ji.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Pallavi Girolkar. I am an engineer and I have done my post-graduation diploma in public policy and sustainable development. Currently, I'm working with Clean Energy Access Network. But during my post-graduation, we have a subject on this gender-based economy and policies based on gender equality. So this topic actually got my interest. And I have been working with some of NGOs who are working in field of education and making awareness, spreading awareness in rural societies and economically backward societies. So I wanted some local solution or some core solution for these situations and problems which women are facing in the society. So that's why I joined it. And
are you working in rural Maharashtra?
No, I am working in, my organization is based in Pune, and we are working in solar energy and distributed renewable energy sector as of now. But yes, I want to change my way of path of work, and I want to work something based on gender equality and maybe in agriculture and sort of that thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Pallavi. Now we can move to Anushri Banerjee. Anushri Banerjee, could you please unmute yourself?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'm actually not Anushri, I'm actually Pallavi. So the thing is that I enrolled for the course and the Zoom link accidentally was then sent to me, and I have had a chat with IMPRI. They have said that they're going to send me a link tomorrow. So I joined using my friend's link, who is also a participant. So I am Pallavi Chakraborty. I'm currently pursuing B.Ed from St. Xavier's College. I've also completed my master's in English literature from St. Xavier's. And I'm also an independent researcher. My research areas include minority literature, trauma studies, memory studies, and gender studies. Particularly, I'm very interested in queer studies and how the field has, evolved over the years.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, next we can move to Seema Malhotra ji.
Hi, this is Seema Malhotra, and I'm a founder of Scope Plus. And for last 20-30 years, we worked in Tihar jail. So I worked more with criminals who were perpetuating crime on the women than, real victims. But still, last 2008, I joined Delhi Police for gender sensitization through Justice Sunanda Bhandare Foundation. Then 2012, with this case really made me, go into depression, and whole lot of stuff happened to me because I'm very emotional. That's why, I got too impacted by that case. And they were in my jail in a sense. They were, jail number 4. They were working. So I decided not to do anything for a few years. But that made me think, this is not correct. And then I went back to gender sensitization, and then Kathua case actually really created havoc in my mind and my body. And then I decided, okay, I'll only talk about awareness and training. So I'm doing good touch, bad touch, and I'm on posh committees for corporates and ministries and colleges. But I wanted to get back into a group work. What one of the speakers really rightly said that, see, I've been an individual for so many years now. I can't do so much. But same thing, we have been talking in 1975, you'd mentioned Dr. Professor Vibhuti, that same essay which I wrote in my 16th year. And today we are talking the same. It's really sad, but then positive things are happening. That's great. So I would like to get back into a group work instead of just being an island, Can't survive like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next we have Prateek Purushothaman ji.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I am Prateek. I am from Chennai. I'm from an organization called PCVC, International Foundation for Crime Prevention and Victim Care. It's a 21-year-old organization working on domestic violence. Along with domestic violence, like now we started focusing on LGBTQA people as well. My education background is in public policy, and since I am looking at research aspects on gender and domestic violence, I thought like this course on various laws and everything will be helpful to me. So that's why I'm here in this course. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next we have Shilpi Pandey ji. Ma'am, could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, this is Shilpi Pandey from Uttarakhand, and I have completed my MA and MSW from IGNOU, and now I'm pursuing a postgraduate diploma in women and gender studies. So I have joined this course to get more clarity on domestic violence and gender-based violence. So I have joined. Thank you so much. You all have given a nice data, presented data, and nice things you have done. And I think I got more clarity on how we mitigate from gender-based violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Arup Kumar Bakshi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening all. Myself, Arup Kumar Bakshi. I am actually working as a professor with Alia University in Kolkata, West Bengal. So I have done my master's in genetics and then I did my MBA. After that, I completed my PhD in business administration. Then I joined academics in a state university. So I have done, I'm on the verge of completing my MSW also. So I've been working with projects funded by ICSSR and UGC, and I'm primarily working with the tribal women in the Birbhum district from where I origin. And recently I have been doing projects which covers intangible cultural heritage and the contribution of women in it, particularly with respect to Chou dance, which is one of the most traditional format of dance, and the participation of women in preparing and manufacturing the masks of Chou dance. Plus, there is another intangible cultural heritage in West Bengal in the district of Purbo Midnapur, which is called the Dewal Chitra, or the wall painting. So primarily my focus is to understand how gender equality is promoted through this women's participation in the propagation, patronization, and preservation of the ICH, and how this, it empowers women socially as well as financially, leading them to raise their voice in the decision making in the social issues. In addition to that, I have been working with the A.K. Dasgupta Center for Planning and Development, which is a part of Niti Aayog of Vishwabharati University, on women entrepreneurship, particularly the local women entrepreneurs who are operating in the Shantiniketan area, which is predominantly a tourist spot also. So these are my areas, as a result of which I was particularly interested about this particular workshop, since I am getting, more and more aware about these gender-related issues. So the deprivation, the disparities, which leads to this kind of violence or attitudes that we are seeing now. And while working on the field also, I get a sense of this. So to understand this in a better way, I'm really interested to complete this course. It's a really privilege to be a part of this course. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I hope you might get gainful insights from this session. And
Sure.
thank you so much, sir. And we have now Simreen Hussain ji.
Evening, everyone. This is Dr. Sambreen Hussain from National Law University, Lucknow. I am an assistant professor for past 11 years. And my interest in gender in law has been from my LLB days. In 2006, I was a member of Women's Studies in Aligarh Muslim University. After that, during my master's also, I was part of a lot of organizations in that regard. And in right now in my this university itself, I am teaching a paper on gender and law, family law, feminist jurisprudence. So my main agenda was like for a very long time, I wanted to actually gauge from other people's experiences, because people who has been in field, people who are directly dealing with these things. So instead of just teaching theory, I wanted to understand the practicalities of this particular problem, this gender-based violence. And right now I'm associated with a legal aid committee of our own organizations, and another organization, Ali in Lucknow, who works for women and women and their empowerment and fighting for justice. So it was just and then again, I have always been a huge fan of Flavia ma'am. So whenever it's her, whenever it's like I could hear a session, I never missed that. I don't know ma'am remembers or not, I called her for a session in our university in 2017 as well as 2018. So it was another chance to listen to her. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So as we are through with the participants' introduction, I request our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to kindly share her final remarks on today's sessions.
So I think I'm highly impressed by the commitment to the question of combating gender-based violence by the participants of this course. And today's session went off so well. And we all have to now work together to fight against gender-based violence, because Women's Movement in India launched the campaigns against this violence way back in the 80s. And now after nearly 40 to 45 years, we need to come up with a far more effective ways of intervention, because the newer and newer forms of violence are coming up, and we need to come up. We also need to prepare ourselves to combat this kind of violence in a very effective way. And that is why I think today's course that we had overview of the overall situation, the analytical framework within which we see this issue. And also Dr. Shalu Nigam brought up the question of accountability of the governance structures, of the criminal justice system, of the community, and of the lawmakers and judiciary. I think that is very important. The way people are washing off their hands when it comes to violence against women. It's not only happening in our country, but globally we see that there is a backlash which is being faced by women who, at one level, they are getting empowered and they are moving ahead, but at the same time, backlash of violence has also become far more aggressive and varied. So I think this course is going to show us the pathways to come up collectively. We'll put our heads together and come up with a strategy, long-term strategy, as well as the immediate tactics to deal with the violence against women and take the preventive measures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for beautifully summarizing the entire session. So before winding up today's session, if anyone from the participants would like to introduce themselves, or if by mistake I have missed anyone, and before that, I would just like to introduce one of our participants, Anushri Banerjee. She has written in the chat box. So her mic is not working. Her name is Anushri Banerjee, and she is pursuing B.Ed at St. Xavier College, Kolkata. And this course has interested her because the issue of gender has always intrigued her, primarily because of the blurring of morals, what is right and what is wrong. Everything and every policy is unsurprisingly though imposed on women or else their bodies, and she would love to know more and expand her knowledge. So any one of the participants who would like to introduce themselves, or I missed? Yes, Taraji. Could you please unmute yourself?
ये आवाज आ रही है?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Tara Shankar. I'm teaching in Delhi University as an assistant professor. I completed my master's, MPhil and PhD from JNU. So at that time, I learned a lot, and I joined this session just to enrich my understanding. I usually do the gender sensitization in my class every day, although I teach remote sensing and GIS. But I completed my MPhil as well as PhD on crime against women. Basically, my work is on mapping the crime, and I am fortunate to be taught by Professor Saraswati Raju and kind of trained by Professor Nivedita Menon. So Flavia, Agnes मैम हैं, इनके इतने सारे आर्टिकल्स मैंने साइट किए अपने PhD और MPhil में. It is good to be here. It is so enriching. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Hope this session
Dr.
may just...
Rachna K. Nair.
Hi and good evening all. I'm Dr. Rachna and I've just finished my MD community medicine and I'm working as a faculty in Father Mulla Medical College, Mangalore. And actually I am planning to do my research in gender-based violence, and I came to know about this the workshop, and it was the first sessions were really interesting. Thank you very much for the session, and I hope to learn a lot from the remaining sessions in the coming days. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. There is one more in the chat box, Atri Dasji. So she is a fellow with TFI, and she has attended this course because she was interested in this subject very much and tend to do her PhD in this subject itself, which is why she want to increase her knowledge in this area.
I'm Nati here again. When it was asked, I just gave about organization, but wanted to tell the purpose because we are working in this gender-based violence from so many years, and my practical knowledge about there are DV Act and all, but when we do hand holding with the client and the process which goes, there is sometimes there are other things which from the panel and means people from here and the group who is learning together, so lot sharing happens and that will enrich my knowledge, so that's why I have joined this course.
Thank you, Professor Nanti.
Thank you, ma'am. There is one more participant, Dr. Divya Paul. She is working as assistant professor in anatomy at Father Muller Medical College, Mangalore.
Dr. Neha Samapriya.
Yes, ma'am. She is Dr. Divya Paul.
Divya Paul, okay. Yeah. Anatomy department.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, with your permission, I would like to go ahead with the final vote of thanks.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
So, as we come to the end of day 1 of ending gender-based violence, awareness of policies and governance, and online National Spring School Program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course, I, Bhanvi, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, would like to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Gender Impact Study Center. And we are grateful to our experts for day 1, Vibhuti Patel ji, and Advocate Dr. Flavia, Agnes ji, and Advocate Dr. Shalu, Nigam ji, for taking out their valuable time and allowing the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. And readings for the session have been shared in your email, and a video of the session will also be shared with you for learning purposes. So we look forward to welcoming you for our second day of the certification course on 6th March at 6 p.m. That is tomorrow. The theme for day 2 is overview of policy frameworks, and the experts are Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, Dr. Wahida Nanar, and Advocate Shalu Nikamji. So we are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube, listening to us on our various podcasts, or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you all a very good evening and thank you.
And one announcement, I have already shared my PPT on the chat box and also by email, which IMPRI team will share with you.
Sure, ma'am.
The PDF of PPT. Yeah.
Thank you.